I sat at my own dinner table while my son smiled and compared me to my ex's new husband, calling me worthless without hesitation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just listened. 5 days later, his life unraveled piece by piece. And when my phone rang that night, I knew the silence I chose had already set something irreversible in motion. Before I tell you how that single sentence from my son changed everything, do me a small favor. Support this story by subscribing and dropping a comment about where you're listening from. It helps these stories reach people who may need them more than they realize. The house on Oak Ridge Drive had always felt warm to me. I built most of it with my own hands over the years. Fixed the deck board myself, replaced the kitchen cabinets one winter when money was tight, rewired the garage after work instead of hiring help. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid, like my life. That evening, the smell of roasted chicken and herbs still lingered in the air, mixing with a faint scent of coffee from earlier. The windows were cracked open, letting in a cool Cedar Falls breeze that carried the sound of distant traffic and rustling trees. Lucas sat across from me at the table, arms folded, jaw tight. My daughter Maya was to my right, nervously pushing peas around her plate, already sensing the tension before it exploded. We'd been talking about small things, weather, Maya's new job interview, the farmer's market opening downtown. Normal talk. Safe talk. Then Lucas leaned back in his chair and laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was sharp, performative. You know, my son said loudly, making sure every word landed, Victor actually knows how to live. He's successful, confident, not stuck doing the same old thing forever. I looked up slowly, meeting my son's eyes. And you, he continued, his voice dripping with certainty. You're nothing compared to Mom's new husband. The room went silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder. Maya inhaled sharply. Lucas, stop, she whispered. I didn't respond. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain exactly, more like clarity snapping into place. My fingers curled around my water glass, knuckles whitening, but my face stayed calm. Lucas mistook my silence for weakness. See, he said, gesturing toward me. That's exactly what I mean. Always quiet. Always settling. Victor's a winner. You just exist. I could hear my own heartbeat. Years of memories crashed through me in seconds. Teaching Lucas how to ride a bike in the driveway. Working double shifts during winter layoffs so he could finish college. Signing my name on loan documents so he could move into the Willow Creek townhome when his credit wasn't good enough. Paying insurance on the car he drove every day. Covering his utilities when he said work was slow. I had built his safety net thread by thread. Maya pushed her chair back slightly. That's enough, she said, her voice trembling. Dad has done everything for us. Lucas scoffed. That's the problem. He made it too easy. He stood up, grabbing his jacket. Victor says struggle builds character. Maybe it's time you stop protecting him, Dad, and let reality speak. Then he walked out. The door closed with a dull finality. Maya reached for my hand. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. He doesn't mean it. I squeezed her fingers gently. He means exactly what he said. I replied, my voice steady. He's just never had to hear the echo of his own words. That night, after Maya left, I sat alone at the table long after the dishes went cold. I didn't clean up. I didn't pace. I just sat there, staring at the faint scratches on the wood where Lucas once carved his initials as a teenager. Silence isn't empty. Silence is a decision. By morning, my decision was made. At sunrise, I drove to Willow Creek. The townhome looked just as I remembered. 2 stories, beige siding, neat lawn. The car sat in the driveway, the one I bought, insured and maintained. I knocked once. Lucas opened the door, rubbing his eyes. Dad? What are you doing here? I need the keys, I said. He blinked. Keys to what? The car. He laughed. You're joking. I pulled the registration from my jacket pocket. It's in my name. His smile vanished. This isn't about dinner, he snapped. You're being petty. No, I replied calmly. This is about reality. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as Lucas slammed the keys into my palm. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I drove away slowly, leaving him standing barefoot on the porch. That was day one. By the time the sun set, the bank had confirmed the mortgage arrangement. The townhome was mine. Always had been. Lucas called me 7 times that night. I didn't answer, because silence, once chosen, has a way of finishing what words never could. And this was only the beginning. By the second morning, the phone wouldn't stop vibrating. I didn't answer it while making coffee. I didn't answer it while reading the foreclosure confirmation email that landed quietly in my inbox at 8:12 a.m. I didn't answer it when I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall where old family photos used to hang before I took them down after the divorce. Silence, I was learning, is louder when people are used to you fixing everything. The first voicemail was anger. "Dad, you've crossed the line," my son said, voice sharp, controlled, rehearsed. "You can't just take things back because your ego got hurt. Victor says this won't hold up legally." Victor? The second voicemail was panic. "Okay, look, the bank called. There's been some mistake. They're saying the mortgage payment didn't go through. I need you to fix this. Now." The third voicemail was desperation. "Please, just call me back." I deleted them all without listening to the rest. At 9, I put on my jacket and drove downtown to Reed and Holloway Legal Group. I hadn't needed a lawyer in years, but some relationships only matter when the foundation cracks, and I had laid this one carefully long ago. Thomas Reed looked older than I remembered. Same firm handshake. Same way of listening, without interrupting. "So," he said after reviewing the documents I slid across his desk, "your son never owned the house?" "No," I replied. "He lived there, and the car registered to me, insurance in my name, payments from my account." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then everything you did yesterday was lawful." I exhaled for the first time since dinner. "Victor Hale," I said, tapping the desk. "My ex-wife's husband. He's going to interfere." Thomas smiled faintly. "Men like that always do, and they always underestimate paperwork." He paused and added, "One more thing, you might want to brace yourself. When support disappears, entitlement doesn't fade, it lashes out." He was right. By noon, my daughter Maya called. "Dad," she said softly, "Lucas is spiraling." "I know." He showed up at Mom's place. Victor wouldn't let him stay. That surprised me. Not because Victor was cruel, but because Victor was strategic. Victor told him this was a lesson, Maya continued. Said a real man builds his own stability. "Lucas slept in his car last night." I closed my eyes. "Are you okay with this?" Maya asked carefully. "I didn't push him," I said. "I stopped carrying him." There's a difference. That afternoon, I received my first call from Evelyn, my ex-wife. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Lucas is falling apart." "I'm letting him stand." I replied, "You're punishing him." "No," I said calmly. "I'm stepping out of the way." She scoffed. "Victor says this is emotional manipulation." I laughed once, short and dry. "Victor says a lot of things when he's not paying the bills." There was silence on the line. Then quieter, "He can't stay here, Daniel." Of course he couldn't. Victor never wanted Lucas dependent on him. He wanted Lucas loyal to him. That night, I sat alone in the living room as rain tapped softly against the windows. I replayed the dinner moment in my head, not with anger anymore, but clarity. My son had insulted me. He'd announced his belief system. And belief systems collapse when reality stops subsidizing them. On day 3, the eviction notice was delivered. I didn't send it personally. I didn't need to. The process moved like clockwork. Forms filed, timeline set. No raised voices. No confrontation. Lucas showed up that evening, pounding on my door. I opened it slowly. He looked smaller. No jacket. Eyes red. Pride cracked but not gone. "You really going through with this?" he asked. "Yes." "Over one sentence?" I met his gaze. "Over 30 years of sentences." He swallowed. "Victor says you're doing this because Mom left you. That one landed. but not the way he expected. "No," I replied. "I'm doing this because I stayed." He laughed bitterly. "You think this teaches me something?" "I think," I said quietly, "this finally gives you the chance to learn." He stepped closer. "You're going to lose me." I didn't step back. "You already walked away," I said. "I just stopped chasing." He stood there for a long moment, waiting, maybe for me to soften, to bargain, to rescue. I didn't. Eventually, he turned and left. That night, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Lucas. It was Evelyn, and she was crying. "Daniel," she whispered, voice shaking. "Victor is furious. He says this mess is bad for his business image. He wants this fixed." I stared out into the dark yard, the old oak trees swaying in the wind. "I didn't break anything," I replied. "I just let go." She hesitated. "He says if you don't undo this, things will escalate." That was when I realized something important. Victor wasn't worried about Lucas. Victor was worried about exposure. And suddenly, the dinner insult felt smaller than what was coming next. Because when men like Victor start panicking, they don't retreat. They make mistakes. And I was ready to watch him make every single one. By the fourth day, the story had grown teeth. It wasn't just about Lucas anymore. It hadn't been, not really. Lucas was the spark. But Victor was the fuel, and now that the fire was spreading beyond his control, he was scrambling to contain it. I found out the way I'd learned most hard truths in life. Quietly, and not from the people involved. Elaine Porter, my accountant of 15 years, called me mid-morning. "Daniel," she said, skipping her usual pleasantries, "I need to ask you something odd." "Go ahead." "Have you ever co-signed anything for Victor Hale?" "No," I said without hesitation. "Never." She paused. "That's what I thought. But your name came up in a review this morning. Not as a signer, more like context. That got my attention." Elaine explained that one of Victor's companies, Hale Strategic Solutions, had been flagged internally by a regional bank. Not frozen, not audited yet, flagged. The kind of flag that made compliance officers nervous enough to start pulling threads. "And your name?" I asked. "Came up in reference to personal influence," she said carefully. "Someone mentioned that Victor had leverage over family assets that weren't actually his." I leaned back in my chair. Victor had been talking. Too much. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the wall where the old family calendar used to hang. The one Evelyn bought every year, filled with birthdays and school events, and holidays I used to circle in red ink. This wasn't about money. It never was. It was about control. Victor didn't just want to be admired. He needed to be unquestioned. And men like that don't tolerate loose ends, especially ones that expose how much of their image is borrowed. By noon, Lucas called again. I let it ring. Then again. On the third try, I answered. "Dad," he said immediately, voice hoarse, stripped of its usual edge. "I'm running out of options." I didn't respond. "I talked to Victor," he continued. "He said he'd help, but only if you reverse everything. He said you're trying to humiliate him." There it was. Not me. Him. "I'm not thinking about Victor at all," I said. "That should tell you something." Lucas exhaled sharply. "I don't have anywhere to go." "You do," I replied. "You just don't like them." "Shelters aren't options," he snapped. "I'm not like those people." I closed my eyes. That sentence hurt more than the one at dinner. "Those people," I said quietly, "are people who didn't have a safety net. You had one. For decades." He was silent. Then, softer. "What do you want from me?" I thought about that. What did I want? An apology wouldn't rebuild trust. Gratitude wouldn't undo entitlement. Even remorse could be temporary if comfort returned too quickly. "I want you to stand without leaning," I said finally, "however long that takes." He laughed bitterly. "Victor says you're enjoying this." "I'm not enjoying anything," I said. "I'm enduring it." The call ended without resolution. That afternoon, the first letter arrived from Victor's attorney. It was aggressive, sloppy, emotional, accusations of coercion, claims of retaliation. Threats of civil action if I didn't restore access to previously promised assets. Promised. I forwarded it to Thomas Reed, without comment. His reply came an hour later. This letter helps us more than it hurts them. That evening, Maya came by. She didn't announce herself. She just walked in like she always had, dropping her bag by the door, eyes scanning my face. "You look tired," she said. "I am." She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same spot where Lucas had sat days earlier. She didn't mention that. I appreciated her for it. "I saw Lucas today," she said gently. "He's unraveling." "I know." He slept in his car again. Victor wouldn't answer his calls this time. I nodded slowly. Maya leaned forward. "Dad, I need to ask something, and I need you to answer honestly." "Okay. If Lucas truly hits bottom, if this goes worse than you expect, will you step in?" The question hung between us. I thought about the countless times I'd stepped in before he ever fell, the jobs I'd lined up, the bills I'd paid quietly, the consequences I'd absorbed so he didn't have to. "I won't let him disappear," I said carefully, "but I won't stop the fall either." Maya's eyes filled slightly. "That's hard." "Yes," I agreed, "but necessary." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you." After she left, I sat alone again, the house creaking softly as night settled in. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Daniel." A man said, voice low, controlled. "This is Victor Hale." Of course it was. "I think we should talk like adults," he continued, man to man. "We are," I replied. "You called." I answered. A pause. Then a chuckle. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "I'm correcting one." He sighed theatrically. "You destabilize things. Lucas is upset. Evelyn is stressed. My name is being dragged into unnecessary noise." "Then stop talking about me," I said. His voice sharpened. "You think you're in a position to give advice?" "I think," I replied evenly, "that you built your authority on other people's labor and silence, and you're uncomfortable now that one of them stopped providing both." The silence on the line stretched. Then colder. "This won't end well for you." I smiled, not because I was amused, but because something finally clicked. "It already ended," I said. "You just didn't notice when." I hung up, and for the first time since the dinner, I slept through the night. The next morning, day 5, I woke up to 3 things. A message from Thomas confirming Victor's attorney had gone quiet. A voicemail from Evelyn, frantic, asking me to call her immediately. And a text from Lucas that simply said, "I don't know who Victor really is, but I think you do." I stared at the screen. 5 days. That was all it took for the illusion to crack. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever Evelyn was about to tell me next wasn't going to fix anything. It was going to expose everything. By the time I returned Evelyn's call, the day had already taken on a weight I couldn't ignore. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel," she said, voice tight and rushed. "We need to talk. In person." I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching sunlight crawl across the floor like nothing in the world was wrong. "You can say it now." There was a pause. A long one. Then a breath she tried and failed to steady. "Victor's business accounts are frozen." I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised. Because I finally understood the scale of what was happening. "What do you mean frozen?" I asked calmly. "I mean banks," she snapped, the panic bleeding through. "Auditors, lawyers, phones ringing nonstop. He came home furious last night, accusing everyone of betrayal. He thinks you're behind it." "I didn't call any banks," I replied truthfully. "But you started this," she insisted. "You cut Lucas off. You humiliated Victor. Now everything is collapsing." I let the accusation sit. "Evelyn," I said slowly, "if everything collapses when one person stops paying, then it was never standing on its own." She went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "He's not who I thought he was." That sentence carried more weight than any insult Lucas had thrown at me. "What happened?" I asked, She hesitated. Then words spilled out faster, Messier. Victor had been moving money between entities she didn't understand. Loans secured by future contracts that never materialized. Investors promised returns that depended on constant expansion. A structure that only worked as long as confidence stayed intact. And silence covered the gaps. And now, she whispered, people are asking questions. I pictured Victor's perfect suits. His polished speeches about discipline and ambition. The way he talked about winners and losers like the categories were permanent. How bad? I asked. Bad, she said. And Lucas is caught in the middle. There was again, my son, always positioned as collateral in other people's power plays. I warned him. I said quietly, I know, she replied, her voice cracking. But he listened to Victor. He believed him. I didn't say what I was thinking. That belief is easy when someone else pays the price. That afternoon, Lucas showed up again. He didn't knock this time. He rang the bell once, then stood back, hands shoved deep into his pockets like a child waiting outside a principal's office. I opened the door. He looked exhausted. Not dramatic exhaustion. Real exhaustion. The kind that comes when bravado finally runs out. I'm not here to fight, he said immediately. I stepped aside. Then come in. He sat at the table. The same chair. The same angle. But he didn't lean back this time. His shoulders slumped forward. Hands clasped together. I was wrong, he said, staring at the wood grain. About you. About him. About everything. I stayed silent. Victor promised me opportunities. Lucas continued. Connections. He said you were holding me back, that you didn't understand how the world really works. And now, I asked, and now I realize he only liked me when I made him feel superior, he said bitterly. The moment I became inconvenient, I was disposable. I nodded once. That's the difference between guidance and control. I said, one teaches you to stand. The other teaches you to kneel. Lucas swallowed. He asked me to lie. That got my full attention. Lie about what? About money, he said. About where it came from. About you. He wanted me to say you promised him assets. That you backed his ventures. I felt something cold settle in my chest. And did you? No, Lucas said quickly. I didn't. I couldn't. That's when he stopped taking my calls. There it was. Not rejection because of failure, but rejection because of integrity. I slept in a parking lot last night. Lucas said quietly, I kept thinking about what I said at dinner, about calling you worthless. He looked up at me then, eyes red, stripped of arrogance. I don't know when I became that person. I considered him carefully. You became that person when comfort replaced accountability. I said, it happened slowly, quietly. He nodded, shame etched into every line of his face. I don't expect you to fix this, he said. I just needed you to know. I see it now. I stood, walked to the sink, poured 2 glasses of water, and brought one back to the table. I'm not here to punish you, I said. I'm here to stop protecting you from yourself. He accepted the glass with trembling hands. Victor's in trouble, Lucas added. Real trouble. He thinks you're the reason. I'm not, I replied, but I won't save him either. Lucas exhaled. Mom's scared. So am I. I admit it, but fear isn't a signal to surrender. It's a signal to pay attention. He stayed for another hour. We didn't rehash the past. We didn't bargain. We talked about practical things, job listings, temporary housing, what starting over actually looks like without shortcuts. When he left, he didn't ask for money. That mattered. That night, Evelyn called again. He's unraveling, she said. Victor, he's blaming everyone. He thinks people conspired against him. People didn't, I said. Numbers did. She laughed weakly. I don't know how I didn't see it. Because confidence can look like competence, I replied, until it's tested. There was a long silence. Daniel, she said finally, if this gets worse, will you help Lucas? I already am, I said, just not the way you're used to. When I hung up, I walked out onto the porch. The night air was cool, steady. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. A car passed. Ordinary sounds in an ordinary world. 5 days earlier, my son had called me nothing. Now, the man he praised was collapsing under his own weight, and I hadn't raised my voice once. But I could feel it, deep in my chest, that the storm wasn't over yet. Because when facades fall, they don't just crumble, they take things with them. The next morning arrived heavy with the kind of quiet that follows a storm you know isn't finished. I woke before sunrise, not from anxiety, but from habit. Years of construction work had trained my body to rise early, to assess, to prepare. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching Cedar Falls slowly come alive. Sprinklers clicked on. A delivery truck rumbled past. Somewhere, a neighbor's radio played low country music. Life moved forward, indifferent of family implosions. My phone buzzed at 6:18 a.m. A text from Maya. Dad, I just heard something. Victor's office was raided this morning. I stared at the screen for a long moment. So it had crossed that line. By 8, the local news confirmed it. Carefully worded, vague, but unmistakable. Authorities are reviewing financial irregularities tied to multiple business entities operated by regional entrepreneur Victor Hale. Regional entrepreneur. I almost laughed. For years, Victor had positioned himself as untouchable. The man with connections. The man who knew how the system worked. And now, the same system he'd boasted about was quietly turning him inside out. Evelyn called just after 9. She sounded hollow. They took his computers, she said. Files. Boxes. Everything. I'm sorry, I replied, and I meant it, in the way you feel sorry when someone finally collides with consequences you warned them about. He says it's a misunderstanding, she continued, that it'll blow over. Does he believe that? I asked. No, she whispered, but he needs me to. That afternoon, Lucas came by again. This time, he looked different, not defeated, but alert, like someone waking up from a long, expensive dream. I talked to a recruiter, he said, sitting down without prompting. Warehouse job, early mornings, hard work. I nodded. Good place to start. They don't care who my stepfather is, he added quietly. They just care if I show up. Most places do, I said. He hesitated. Victor tried to call me. I looked up. What did he want? To know if I'd said anything, Lucas replied. If I'd talked to anyone. If I'd kept loyalty. And I told him the truth. Lucas said that I didn't owe him anything. That took more courage than Lucas realized. He didn't like that, Lucas added. He said you poisoned me against him. I smiled faintly. Truth has a way of tasting like poison to people who thrive on illusion. Lucas exhaled. Mom's staying with a friend tonight. Things are tense. I didn't press for details. Some realizations have to arrive without commentary. That evening, I received an email from Victor, not through lawyers, not through threats. Direct. Daniel, we need to speak. Privately. Man to man. This situation has spiraled unnecessarily. I believe we can still reach an understanding. I didn't reply. An hour later, another email arrived. I won't pretend mistakes weren't made, but you must understand this affects your son too. Dragging this out helps no one. There it was. The pivot. When intimidation fails. Appeal to guilt. I forwarded both emails to Thomas Reed and closed my laptop. That night, I dreamed of the dinner table. Only this time, the chairs were empty. On day 6, everything accelerated. Victor's accounts were officially frozen pending investigation. 2 of his partners issued statements distancing themselves. A third resigned quietly. The facade wasn't just cracking, it was shedding. Lucas texted me around noon. He's blaming you publicly now. I turned on the radio. The local business segment played a short clip from Victor himself, voice polished but strained. There appears to be a personal vendetta involved, Victor said. Certain individuals close to my family have acted out of resentment. Resentment. The irony almost impressed me. By late afternoon, Thomas called. He's panicking, my lawyer said, and panicked people make mistakes. Like what? Like threatening the wrong people, Thomas replied. He contacted your bank. Try to access historical records tied to you. That was flagged immediately. I closed my eyes. He thinks I orchestrated this. I said, he thinks, Thomas replied, that you're more powerful than you ever let on. That night, Evelyn showed up at my door. She looked smaller than I remembered. Tired. Older. I don't know where else to go, she said quietly. I stepped aside. We sat in the living room like strangers who shared a past they didn't quite recognize anymore. He lied to me, she said after a while. About money. About risk. About you. I know, I replied. He said you were bitter, she continued. That you resented his success. I didn't respond. I believed him, she said, voice breaking, because it was easier than admitting I chose wrong. I looked at her then, not with anger, not with triumph, but with clarity. I wasn't bitter, I said. I was busy, building, supporting, staying. She nodded slowly. Lucas sees it now. I'm glad, I said, but seeing isn't the same as changing. She wiped her eyes. Victor wanted me to testify on his behalf. That made me sit up, and I asked, and I won't, she said. I'm done lying. We sat in silence after that. When she left, the house felt lighter. On day 7, 5 days after the dinner, Lucas called me in the evening. I got the job, he said. Starts Monday. That's good, I replied. There's something else, he said. Victor's lawyer contacted me, asked me to sign a statement. I refused. My grip tightened slightly on the phone. He's trying to shield himself, I said. Yeah, Lucas replied, but I'm not standing in front of him anymore. After the call, I stepped outside and looked up at the night sky. The stars were sharp, cold, honest. 5 days ago, my son had dismissed my entire life in one sentence. Now, the man he praised was unraveling under scrutiny he couldn't charm away. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't threatened. I hadn't begged. I had simply stopped compensating for other people's choices. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end yet, because when people like Victor lose control, they don't accept it quietly. They look for someone to blame. And next, he was going to come for me. By the 8th day, the silence around Victor had become louder than his voice ever was. It was a kind of quiet that follows exposure. The sudden absence of bravado, the vanishing phone calls, the retreat of people who once laughed too loudly at his jokes. Men like Victor don't disappear all at once. They shrink, slowly, desperately, and they almost always lash out before they do. I felt it before I saw it. That morning, my truck wouldn't start. At first, I thought it was a battery. The engine turned halfway, coughed, then died. I popped the hood, tools already in hand, instinct kicking in. Everything looked normal, until I noticed the cable clamp had been loosened. Not corroded, not worn. Loosened, carefully, deliberately. I stood there longer than necessary, the morning air cool against my skin, and let the realization settle. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. This was a message. Inside the house, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Unknown number. I played it on speaker. Daniel. Victor's voice said, stripped of polish, edged with something sharp and unstable. You're enjoying this. I know you are. But you need to understand, you don't win by humiliating me. People like me don't lose quietly. I didn't delete the message. I saved it. Then I called Thomas. He's escalating. My lawyer said after I explained, which means he's cornered. Should I be worried? I asked. Alert, Thomas replied. Not afraid. By noon, the story had shifted again. Victor's name was trending locally, not in headlines, but in whispers. Vendors backing out. Contracts suspended. A former associate filing a civil complaint. The structure that relied on confidence was now being examined under fluorescent light. Lucas stopped by in the afternoon. He looked over my truck and frowned. That's not accidental. No, I agreed. It's desperation. Lucas exhaled. He called me again. What did he say? That you're destroying the family, Lucas replied. that if I stand with him, he'll make sure I'm taken care of. And Lucas shook his head. I told him I already chose. That mattered more than he knew. Later that evening, Maya called. "Dad," she said, "Mom just left Victor's place." "Permanently?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. She found documents, hidden accounts, transfers, things that don't make sense. I closed my eyes. The illusion wasn't just cracking. It was collapsing inward. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid, but because I was waiting. And Victor didn't disappoint. At 2:17 a.m., my doorbell rang. I didn't answer immediately. I checked the porch camera. Victor stood there alone. No suit, no confident posture. Just a man with his hands clenched at his sides, jaw tight, eyes burning with something between rage and panic. I opened the door. "Daniel," he said quickly, stepping forward. "We need to talk. Now." "Not here," I replied calmly. He laughed, a hollow sound. "You think I'm dangerous?" I said evenly, "that you don't handle losing well." His eyes flicked past me, scanning the house. "You've poisoned them against me." "No," I replied. "You did that yourself." He leaned closer. "You think because you stayed quiet all these years that you're innocent? You benefited too." I smiled slightly. I benefited from work, from patience, from not borrowing what I couldn't repay. His face reddened. "You're smug." "No," I corrected. "I'm done." That broke something in him. "You don't get to decide that." Victor snapped. "I built things. I created value." "You leverage people," I said. "That's not the same." For a moment, I thought he might swing. Instead, he stepped back, breathing hard. "This isn't over," he said. "It is," I replied. "You just don't accept it yet." I closed the door. The next morning, the knock came again, this time from someone else. Two men, plain clothes, calm demeanor. "Mr. Hale?" one asked. "No," I said, "but I know who you're looking for." They didn't smile. Victor was taken into custody that afternoon, not arrested yet, but detained for questioning. Financial crimes don't explode. They tighten. Lucas called me afterward. "They took him," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. There was a long pause. "I believed him," Lucas said, "because believing him made me feel important." I didn't interrupt. "And tearing you down made me feel taller," he continued, "until I realized I was standing on borrowed ground." That was the truth. In the days that followed, things slowed, but only on the surface. Victor's legal team collapsed. Evelyn formally separated from him. Associates testified. Files surfaced. Patterns emerged. And through it all, I stayed where I always had been. Quiet. Watching. No need to chase consequences. They were finally doing the chasing. One evening, as I sat on the porch, Maya joined me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "just thinking." "About what?" "How strange it is," I replied, "that the moment I stopped trying to be understood, everything became clear." She smiled softly. Inside, my phone buzzed again. A single text. From an unknown number. "You think this ends clean?" It doesn't. I stared at it. Then I deleted it. Because by then I understood something Victor never would. Control doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from knowing when you no longer need to respond. And somewhere, far away from my porch and my quiet life, Victor was learning that lesson the hard way. Whether he accepted it was a different matter entirely. By the ninth day, the noise around Victor had turned into something else entirely. Not panic, not rage, fear. It shows itself differently in people like him. Fear doesn't make them retreat. It makes them calculate. It sharpens their memory. It turns every interaction into a ledger of debts and grudges. That's why I wasn't surprised when the retaliation didn't come loudly. It came quietly. I found out through Thomas first. "Someone accessed archive records connected to you," he said over phone. "Not illegally, but aggressively. Old permits, past contracts, even employment filings from 20 years ago. Victor? I asked. Not directly, Thomas replied. But the fingerprints are obvious. He's trying to find leverage. Anything that looks like a flaw. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Good luck, I said calmly. My life's boring. Thomas chuckled once. That's what scares people like him. Still, I didn't underestimate it. Men who feel cornered don't look for justice. They look for symmetry. If they're falling, they want someone else falling beside them. Lucas came over that afternoon, face tight. He's calling extended family now, my son said. Cousins, old friends, people who barely know him, telling stories. What kind of stories? I asked. Lucas hesitated. That you manipulated him. That you've always been controlling. That you cut him off to punish Mom. I nodded slowly. Victor was reframing. That's how he survives, I said. He doesn't argue facts. He replaces them. Lucas clenched his jaw. Some people are listening. That's fine, I replied. Let them. He looked at me sharply. You're not worried? No, I said, because people who listen without asking questions were never really listening to me anyway. That night, the first call came. An old friend. Someone I'd worked alongside years ago. I heard some things, the man said awkwardly. Just checking in. I'm sure you did, I replied gently. And you're welcome to ask me anything. He didn't. Most people don't. They want reassurance without confrontation. By morning, I'd received 3 more messages like that. I answered each one the same way. Calm, open, uninterested in defending myself. That unsettled them more than anger ever could. On day 10, Evelyn called again. She sounded steadier this time. He's trying to move assets, she said, shifting ownership, selling off pieces quietly. That won't help, I replied. I know, she said, but he thinks speed equals safety. There was a pause. He asked me to say you threatened him. I closed my eyes briefly. And I refused, she said. I told him the truth, that he built this on lies. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Thank you, I said. That couldn't have been easy. No, she replied, but staying silent was worse. Later that afternoon, I learned Victor had been formally charged. Not publicly announced yet, but confirmed. Multiple counts. Financial misrepresentation. Fraud. Obstruction. The kind of charges that don't fade quietly. Lucas found out the same way I did, from a third party. He's done, my son said over the phone, voice low. He doesn't know it yet, but he is. Yes, I replied. He is. There was a long silence. Dad, Lucas said, I keep thinking about that dinner. So do I admitted. I don't know why I said it, he continued. I think I needed to believe you were small. Because if you weren't, then I had no excuse for standing in someone else's shadow. That was the most honest thing he'd ever said. I wasn't small, I said. I was stable. And stability looks boring when you're chasing applause. Lucas exhaled shakily. I want to do better. Then do, I replied. Not for me. For yourself. That evening, I received an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A typed note. You think silence makes you powerful. It just makes you invisible. This isn't finished. I read it once. Then again. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in my desk drawer. Because what Victor never understood was this. Silence doesn't erase you. It forces people to confront what remains when the noise stops. And what remained was evidence. Patterns. Consequences. That night, as I locked the door and turned off the lights, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not triumph. Not relief. Finality approaching. Victor was running out of moves. And when people like him reach the end of the board, they don't bow out. They flip it. The only question left was whether he would do it publicly or try one last time to drag someone else down with him. By the 11th day, the silence had turned predatory. Not mine, his. Victor stopped calling, stopped emailing, stopped trying to bend people to his version of events. And that worried me more than the threats ever had. Men like him don't go quiet because they've accepted defeat. They go quiet because they're choosing their moment. I felt in my bones. I'd spent most of my life reading environments, job sites, people, systems under strain. When something is about to fail catastrophically, there's always a moment of unnatural calm right before it gives way. That was where we were. The morning began with a call from Thomas. He's filed a civil complaint. My lawyer said, not against you directly, against Evelyn. I frowned. On what grounds? Breach of marital confidence, defamation, emotional damages. It's weak but strategic. He's isolating. I said, exactly, Thomas replied. If he can't regain control, he'll fracture everyone else. An hour later, Evelyn called me herself. He's punishing me, she said quietly, for not protecting him. I'm sorry, I replied, but this is who he's always been. You're just seeing it without the polish now. She laughed softly. I used to think strength was loud. So, did Lucas? I said. She hesitated. Victor said something before I left. What? He said, Daniel thinks he won because he's quiet. He doesn't understand how this ends. I closed my eyes. Victor wasn't talking about court. He was talking about reputation. By noon, the smear campaign started in earnest. Not headlines, whispers. Social media posts from anonymous accounts. Vague accusations. Suggestive language. Enough to raise eyebrows, not enough to stand on. The kind of fog that makes people uneasy without knowing why. Lucas sent me screenshots. He's implying you were abusive, my son said, anger simmering beneath his words. That you controlled Mom financially. That you manipulated me. I read the post carefully. Victor was careful never to name me directly. He didn't need to. I'm not responding. I said. Lucas snapped. Why not? You should shut this down. No, I replied. If I rush to defend myself, I validate the premise. Let him talk. But people will believe it. Some will, I said calmly. They always do, and they're welcome to. That frustrated Lucas more than Victor ever could. You're letting him rewrite your life, my son said. No, I replied. I'm letting him expose his own. That night, Maya came over. She'd seen the post too. Dad, this is getting ugly, she said. People are speculating. I know. Doesn't it bother you? I thought about it. Once. I said slowly, I believe dignity came from being understood. Now I know it comes from being consistent. She nodded, though uneasily. Around midnight, the knock came. Not at the front door. At the side gate. I didn't open it immediately. I checked the camera feed on my phone. Victor stood there, half hidden by shadow, one hand gripping the metal gate. His face thinner, harder, eyes sharp with something that no longer resembled confidence. I stepped outside, but didn't open the gate. What do you want? I asked. He laughed quietly, still hiding behind silence. I'm not hiding, I replied. I'm choosing distance. You think you won, Victor said, because banks froze accounts? Because lawyers circled? You don't understand how this ends. Then explain it to me. I said calmly. He leaned closer to the gate. I'll make sure your name never washes clean. I'll tell your story before you do. I studied him for a moment. You don't know my story. I said, you've only borrowed parts of it. He sneered. People don't care about truth. They care about confidence. Then you should be fine, I replied. You've always had plenty of that. His face twitched. You think I'm scared? He snapped. No, I said, I think you're desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. His voice dropped. This isn't finished. I nodded once. You already said that. He stepped back, shaking his head. You're not as harmless as you pretend. I never pretended. I replied, I just didn't advertise. He left without another word. The next morning, everything broke. Authorities executed a second warrant, this time public. Victor was formally arrested. Headlines followed. Real ones, detailed ones. Names, numbers, timelines. The fog cleared overnight. The post vanished. Accounts went silent. Whispers turned into confirmations. Lucas called me from work, breathless. They arrested him. It's everywhere. Yes, I replied. I don't know how to feel, he admitted. Relieved, ashamed, angry. All of those are allowed, I said. Just don't let any of them turn you bitter. Evelyn called later. He tried to blame you, she said, but they already had everything. Records, emails, transfers. I closed my eyes. Victor hadn't lost because of me. He'd lost because he'd built his life on leverage instead of truth. That evening, I sat alone on the porch again. Same chair, same quiet, but the air felt different, lighter. Still, I knew better than to mistake exposure for closure. Because while Victor's power was gone, his resentment wasn't. And men like him don't stop believing they were wrong just because the world finally sees who they are. They wait, they remember, and sometimes they plan one last move. By the 12th day, the world had decided what Victor Hale was. Fraudster, manipulator, a man whose confidence had been stitched together from other people's money and silence. But Victor hadn't decided who he was yet, and that distinction mattered. I realized it the morning after his arrest, when a uniformed officer knocked on my door, not to accuse me of anything, but to warn me. Mr. Carter, he said calmly, notebook tucked under his arm. This is informal, off the record. But given your proximity to Mr. Hale, we want you to be aware of something. I listened. He's been asking about you, the officer continued. Not threatening, not directly, but asking. A lot. From custody? I asked. Yes, the officer replied. He believes you orchestrated his downfall. I nodded once. That belief won't leave him. No, the officer agreed, which is why we're advising caution. People who lose status don't always lose entitlement. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. Victor was finished in every way that mattered publicly. But privately, he was still the kind of man who believed the world owed him symmetry, that if he fell, someone else must fall too. That kind of thinking doesn't dissolve with handcuffs. It calcifies. Lucas called later that morning. They're talking about a plea deal, my son said. Years, maybe more. I heard the disbelief in his voice, not sympathy, not celebration, just the shock of watching an idol collapse. How are you holding up? I asked. I keep replaying everything, Lucas admitted. All the times I defended him. All the times I blamed you. I didn't rush to reassure him. You needed to learn the difference between admiration and submission, I said. It's a hard lesson, but you're learning it now. I wish I'd learned it sooner, he said quietly. So do I replied. But wishing doesn't build anything. What you do next does. That afternoon, Maya came over with groceries I didn't ask for. She always had that habit, showing care through action, not words. You okay? She asked, unpacking apples. Yes, I said, just adjusting. To what? She asked. To quiet that isn't waiting to explode. She smiled faintly. That might take time. It did. For a few days, things settled. News cycles moved on. Victor's name slid down the headlines. The story became background noise, a cautionary tale instead of a spectacle. Lucas worked long shifts, came home tired, honest tired. Evelyn finalized her separation, slowly, carefully, and I returned to my routines, morning coffee, evening walks, small repairs around the house that reminded me I still knew how to build things. I thought we were done. Victor didn't. 2 weeks after his arrest, I received a letter, handwritten, from the detention center. Daniel, you think you exposed me. You didn't. You revealed yourself. Everyone sees what you are now. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't a threat. It was projection, and that made it dangerous. I showed it to Thomas the next day. He's trying to provoke a response, my lawyer said, or create a narrative. I won't give him either, I replied. Good, Thomas said, because this is the phase where men like him try to salvage meaning. They can't undo what happened, so they rewrite it. Rewrite That word stuck with me. Victor needed a villain, and he needed one who could still hear him. Weeks passed, then months. The trial began. Testimony after testimony. Emails, transfers, lies stacked so high they collapsed under their own weight. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Lucas did. He sat through 3 days of it before calling me late one night. "I heard him talk about you," my son said quietly. "What did he say?" I asked. "That you were always jealous. That you sabotaged him because you couldn't stand seeing someone succeed." I exhaled slowly. "And how did that sound to you?" "Empty," Lucas said, "like someone yelling at a mirror." That was the moment I knew Victor had lost in the only way that mattered. Not legally, personally. When the verdict came, it was decisive. Guilty. Multiple counts. Sentencing scheduled. Victor was escorted out of the courtroom without ceremony. No outburst. No final speech. Just a man walking away from a life he'd mistaken for permanence. The night after the verdict, Lucas came over. He didn't say much. Neither did I. We sat on the porch in silence, watching dust settle in. After a while, he spoke. "I used to think being loud meant being right," he said. "Victor always filled rooms." "Yes," I replied, "but he never built anything that could stand without him." Lucas nodded. "You did." I didn't answer right away. "I didn't build perfectly," I said finally, "but I built honestly." That was enough. Months later, a final letter arrived. From Victor. This one's shorter. "I see now what you are. You outlasted me. Enjoy it." There was no rage in it. No threat. Just the quiet bitterness of a man who had finally run out of angles. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the first. Not as a trophy. As a reminder. That silence isn't weakness. It's restraint. And restraint, when combined with truth, has a way of surviving everything else. On the anniversary of that dinner, I set the table again. Same house. Same wood. Same chair. Lucas came. Maya too. No comparisons. No raised voices. Just food. Conversation. Presence. And as I looked around that table, I realized something important. Victor had wanted to be remembered as powerful. But power fades. What remains is what you built when no one was applauding. And that, finally, was enough. If the story made you pause, reflect, or see family dynamics a little differently, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe, share this video with someone who might need it, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people they're meant for.